Have you ever wondered why the man called the father of American psychology almost became a painter? Why he was traveling Europe while other kids were stuck in school? And why he later admitted he once came so close to ending his own life that it changed how the world understands the human mind forever? Most people only know William James as the genius behind Pragmatism and the 1,200-page masterpiece, Principles of Psychology, but almost nobody knows the strange, wealthy, and secretly painful childhood that actually created him. Tonight, in part 1 of this never-before-told series, we start on January 11, 1842, in New York City, when a boy was born who would one day prove that your truth doesn't have to be my truth, and both can still be right. Stay until the end, because what you're about to hear will change how you see your own mind forever. William James entered the world on January 11, 1842, in New York City. His birth took place during a period of great movement in the United States, when new ideas about society, religion, and personal freedom were taking shape. His family belonged to a class of people who were comfortable in their finances, yet they were not defined by wealth alone. They were more deeply shaped by learning, travel, and the desire to understand life through thought and reflection. William's father, Henry James Sr., had traveled widely and had formed opinions about spirituality and human experience that were unusual for his time. These ideas influenced the household in which William grew up and played a large part in shaping his future mind. From his earliest years, William lived in an environment filled with books, conversation, and questions. His father welcomed friends who shared interest in philosophy and religion, and the home became a place where discussions continued late into the night. These conversations created an atmosphere in which a thoughtful child could grow curious about the world. William was not pushed in the direction of one profession or another, but instead was encouraged to observe and consider. This freedom of mind, which his family considered important, planted the seeds of what he would later call the open and pluralistic spirit, a quality that played a large role in his later writings. The James family traveled often. Henry James Sr. believed that the best education came not only from books but also from moving through different cultures. As a result, William spent parts of his childhood in Europe. These travels opened wider paths to learning. He saw different manners of living, different ways of speaking, and different schools of thought. The young boy who had been born in New York soon became familiar with the streets of Paris, the landscapes of Switzerland, and the older traditions of England. Travels shaped his view of the world as something broad, varied, and filled with possibilities. Instead of believing that one way of thinking was the only correct one, he grew comfortable with the idea that several ways of thinking could exist at the same time. Even as a boy, William was known to be quiet and observant. He did not rush into conversations but listened carefully. He examined the faces of those around him, trying to understand their moods and thoughts. This practice of observation later became an important part of his career as a psychologist, though at the time he did not yet know the direction his life would take. The world of ideas attracted him, but so did the world of art. He had skill with his hands and enjoyed drawing. For a time, he imagined a future in painting, where he could express the impressions he gathered from people and places. His early schooling was irregular and changed depending on where the family lived at any given time. Instead of attending the same school for long periods, he learned it in many different settings. Sometimes he studied under private tutors. At other times, he attended schools in Europe that emphasized classical education. This varied schooling gave him a wide background, though it did not always give him the sense of direction that comes from a stable educational path. Still, his father believed that exposure to diversity would prepare William better for life than any single curriculum. One of the strongest influences on William was his younger brother, Henry James, who later became a famous novelist. The two brothers shared a bond of respect and competition. Each admired the other, though their talents developed in different directions. Henry found his voice through fiction, while William eventually found his own in philosophy and psychology. Their sister, Alice, also possessed a sharp mind and strong will. Though illness prevented her from pursuing an active career, the James family, in its own way, formed a circle of individuals who each contributed a distinct perspective to the shared intellectual life of the household. The moral atmosphere in which William grew up was shaped by his father's belief in inner freedom. Henry James Sr. resisted strict doctrines and encouraged his children to think for themselves. He placed great value on character and personal responsibility, yet he did not insist on rigid discipline. Under such conditions, William developed a sense of respect for the complexity of human nature. He learned early that there are many ways of approaching a question, many motives behind an action, and many types of belief that people hold sincerely. This openness would later become one of the guiding principles of his thought. However, the freedom of his early life also came with uncertainties. Without a fixed path, William sometimes struggled to understand what he should become. His artistic talent drew him one way, while the expectations of society pulled him in another. At times, he felt the weight of indecision, which later turned into periods of personal difficulty. Yet even these early struggles helped him understand the inner movements of the human mind, knowledge that would later form the basis of his psychological insights. As the James family continued to travel, William learned languages and developed a taste for literature, science, and art. He read widely, often choosing books on nature, philosophy, and natural history. His interest in the natural world led him to consider studies in science, though he had not yet decided whether this interest would become a profession. His curiosity, however, remained strong, and his early experiences continued to broaden his imagination. By the time William reached adolescence, he had already lived a life fuller than many adults of his generation. He had seen the customs of Europe, the energy of American cities, and the varied opinions that animated intellectual circles. He developed an early understanding of the contrast between inner thought and outer action, a theme that would later appear frequently in his work. Through travel, discussion, reading, and observation, he laid the foundation that would support his future career as a major thinker. Thus, the early life of William James, though marked by movement and uncertainty, provided the groundwork on which his mature ideas would be built. His childhood did not offer a simple or direct path, but it offered something equally valuable, a rich and varied experience of the world. From this wide foundation, he would go on to become one of the most important voices in American philosophy and psychology. As William James grew older, the character of his early environment became even more important in shaping the direction of his life. His father's unusual beliefs created a home in which questioning was considered not only acceptable but necessary. Henry James Sr. often told his children that the purpose of life was not simply to accept what others said, but to discover truth through one's own experience. This idea influenced William deeply. He learned early that every person must search for meaning in a way that fits his or her own nature. Later in life, William would become known for this same view, which he expressed in his writings on philosophy and psychology. During his early teenage years, William began to show a more serious interest in science, while other boys his age might have been occupied with games or simple studies. William was drawn to the natural world. He found pleasure in examining plants, animals, and the structure of the world around him. Books on natural history attracted him, and he spent long hours studying illustrations and descriptions. These early scientific interests helped sharpen his ability to observe things closely and to think carefully about what he saw. Although William enjoyed science, he also felt an increasing pressure to choose a direction for his life. His father, though supportive, did not give strict guidance. This freedom, while valuable in some ways, also left William uncertain. At times he felt torn between his love for art, his interest in science, and his desire to understand human experience. These conflicting wishes made it difficult for him to settle on a single goal. The uncertainty that marked this period was not unusual. But for William it carried weight, for he was a person who thought deeply about every choice he made. The family continued to travel, and these journeys brought William into contact with different types of education. In Europe, he saw schools that emphasized classical learning, languages, and disciplined study. In America, he encountered a more flexible style of teaching. Moving between these systems gave him a broad background, but it sometimes made his learning uneven. Even so, William used these experiences to deepen his understanding of cultural differences. He noticed how different societies approached knowledge, religion, and the nature of the individual. These early observations would later influence his philosophical position that no single system can fully explain the whole of human life. One of William's greatest strengths during his youth was his ability to pay attention. He watched people carefully and tried to understand their inner states through their expressions and actions. This habit, developed during childhood, stayed with him throughout adulthood. It became a valuable part of his future work in psychology. He did not study people from a distance. Instead, he tried to understand them by placing himself in their position. Even as a young man, he showed sympathy and curiosity toward the feelings and thoughts of others. While William was trying to understand his own interests, the expectations of society sometimes weighed upon him. His family belonged to a class that valued education, achievement, and contribution to the larger world. It was assumed that he would eventually find a respectable profession. Yet, William did not want to enter a field without understanding his own inclinations. He believed that choosing the wrong direction could lead to a life without purpose. This fear of making an unwise choice added to his uncertainty and created moments of restlessness. During this time, art remained an important interest for William. He took lessons in drawing and painting and showed skill in capturing natural scenes. His instructors believed he could become a successful painter if he chose to devote himself to it. For a time, he considered pursuing art as a career. He enjoyed the quiet concentration that painting required. Through art, he could express the impressions he gathered from his surroundings. But even while he painted, William sensed that his curiosity ranged beyond the limits of artistic expression alone. He admired art, yet felt that his nature demanded a wider field of inquiry. The influence of his family continued to play a central role in shaping his character. Henry James Jr., his younger brother, was growing in his own direction, becoming more interested in literature and storytelling. Their conversations, often thoughtful and at times competitive, helped both brothers expand their ideas. Each admired the other's talents, though they differed greatly in temperament. William was more reflective and philosophical, while Henry leaned toward imagination and narrative. Their sister, Alice, though often ill, possessed a strong intellect and sharp insight. Her presence contributed another dimension to the intellectual life of the family, for she questioned assumptions and held firm opinions. William's father, meanwhile, encouraged his children to explore new ideas but did not insist on rigorous discipline. This approach, though generous, sometimes caused William to feel that he lacked the structure needed to make firm decisions, yet it also allowed him the space to grow freely, without the constraints of rigid expectations. In this environment, William learned to find his own path. The freedom of his home, combined with the rich discussions that filled it, helped him develop a mind that welcomed complexity rather than feared it. As William entered adolescence, he continued to struggle with questions about identity and purpose. He wanted to understand not only the world but also his own place within it. These early questions later became part of his mature philosophical thought. He believed that every individual must find meaning for himself and that no external authority can provide a complete answer. This principle, rooted in his early years, later shaped his writings on pragmatism and religion. His travels across Europe broadened his sense of history and culture. In France, he encountered new ideas about art and science. In Germany, he witnessed the disciplined approach to education that later influenced his academic thinking. In England, he observed a society shaped by tradition and intellectual debate. Each new experience added a layer to his understanding, and helped him recognize the many ways in which people approach knowledge and life. By the time William reached young adulthood, he had gathered a wealth of impressions from his travels, studies, and personal reflections. Though he still faced uncertainty about his future, he possessed a foundation of experience unlike that of most young men of his generation. His early life taught him to question, to observe, and to accept complexity. These lessons prepared him for the path he would later follow in philosophy and psychology. Thus, Part 1 continues the picture of William's early years, a life of movement, inquiry, and growing awareness. The varied influences of family, travel, and education shaped his mind and prepared him for the important ideas he would later bring into the world. And that was only the beginning. By the time William James became a teenager, the same freedom his father gave him turned into his darkest nightmare. In the next part, you'll discover the terrifying nervous breakdown that almost destroyed him, the secret trip to the Amazon jungle with the famous scientist Louis Agassiz, and the mysterious letter from Brazil that saved his life and gave birth to modern psychology. Part 2 drops tomorrow evening at 8 p.m. sharp. If you don't want to miss it, hit subscribe and turn on the bell right now. See you in the next chapter.